Hi, everyone. Welcome to the October virtual road trip. I see participants getting on very quickly, so we're going to give it just a few minutes as I see these numbers roll in. We're happy to have Maggie Keen. I'll do an introduction to you with Maggie in just a minute, but let people get situated and comfortable and be ready to enjoy the next hour or so of education. So welcome, everyone. I don't know about you, Maggie, but can you find, is it hard to believe it's October?
The other day, I said, hello, everyone. I said that I feel like I'm fully ascending in the most positive way to becoming my mother. You know, when I say things like, how is it already October? How is it a month to Thanksgiving? It was like, I could be so lucky. The woman is an angel, but I definitely feel like I sound like her when I say those phrases, right? But yeah, it's getting chilly here in Chicago. So
we're ready for it to get chilly in Dallas, believe me.
Yeah,
yeah. Haven't seen fall yet here, so anytime is fine with us. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I see the registration is slowing a bit, so want to welcome everyone. I'm Pam Brandon, president and founder of AGE-u-cate Training Institute, and so happy that you've taken the time. This is an important topic that we're going to be talking about today. So as you're getting comfortable, and I do see more people coming on, just a little bit about AGE-u-cate. If you are new to our road trip, we especially welcome you. We've had a lot of followers that have followed us all year long, but there's always new ones that come aboard. So a little bit about AGE-u-cate. We were founded in 2011. We develop innovative training for professional and family caregivers in the field of aging care and dementia care training. Our core programs include Dementia Live, Compassionate Touch, Flashback, and we are very happy to be partnering with Reading to Connect and Ageless Grace. So we have quite a suite and family of programs that keeps growing, and our network as well. We serve about 800 communities and agencies across the United States. We have a global footprint in Australia and Canada. So a little bit about us, but that's not what the webinar is about. It's about what Maggie has to share. So I'm going to roll right into that, and very happy to introduce Maggie Keen from My Cna Jobs. She is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. My Cna Jobs is a faith-based organization dedicated to serving the needs of direct caregivers and providers nationwide. Maggie is a sought-after national speaker. Not surprising after you hear her present. No pressure, Maggie. But she's on a mission to arm healthcare recruiters with more insight about caregiver motivations to fuel the hiring and retention of recruiters. We know that the workforce is plagued with high turnover, and Maggie is one to do something about it. And I guess that's why we connected so well in our first meeting together. So we're pleased to be traveling to Chicago, where they're actually having fall weather, and to learn more about CNA Jobs, the mission of your organization, and learn about labor trends, the future of recruitment and retention. So Maggie, welcome to the webinar, and I am now going to turn it over to you and stop my video, and so you can share your screen. So welcome, Maggie.
Will do here. Can you, I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Wonderful. Can you see that here, Pam?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Excited to be here today. Thanks for the folks who've carved some time out of what I know is everyone's very busy schedule right now. here. I know this is a virtual roadshow. I miss seeing everyone from a conference perspective very dearly. And I'm neat though that we get to connect here over Zoom here for the next 45 minutes. But typically here at My Cna Jobs, we do one big annual study, and we call it our Caregiver Trend Report every year. We survey millions of caregivers, we glean their insights, we put together trends and a predictions deck that we deliver over a 12-month period in sessions just like this. Well, COVID, like anything, for anybody, threw a kink in that plan. And I'd like to say 2020 is all about plan Bs. I heard earlier that the word of the year was pivot, and I think that's accurate. So what we put together in terms of the perspective of a caregiver in January changed drastically in March when COVID hit. It changed in April, it changed in May, it changed in June. So today's session is really a real-time look at what we're seeing in the market. Some things that we think will stick in the new climate, some things we think will change, both from a recruitment standpoint and a retention standpoint. And I'm going to present here for about a portion of it. Then I'm going to open it up and ask any questions if folks have, and to get your thoughts on any areas that you may want to go deeper. But my goal here today is to help you walk away with one or two concrete strategies that you can bring back to your offices and your communities. It's going to help you kind of ramp recruitment and improve retention in the coming months. For those of you that may be newer to the industry or don't know who we are at My Cna Jobs, I'll do a brief introduction here to help paint a picture of where we're coming from with our data today. My Cna Jobs is the largest network of caregivers, certified nursing assistants, and home health aides in the nation. We're privileged to serve thousands of companies, so home care agencies, private duty agencies, hospice programs, hospitals, health systems, skilled nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, all across the country. But it's also important to note that 70% of all of America's direct care workers are part of our network. So last year, we helped 3.9 million caregivers connect to jobs. So for companies, we offer a suite of recruitment tools, and we serve as a partner in keeping a pulse on the caregiver. We can provide real-time and free insights to the industry on the trends we're seeing in the marketplace, much of which we're sharing here today. For caregivers, we're a free destination to find work, to take online training, to get free CEUs, to access scholarships, and really to move towards the next step in their career. So here's what's in store today. We're going to first look at some pre-COVID market trends that I think are really applicable in helping to understand the psyche of today's worker. Then we're going to look at the current climate and where the puck is going. And then we're going to talk about what you can do about it. So some real strategies that you can add to your playbook. And we'll dive into some Q&A here as well. So one thing I want to highlight, and we'll see with my Zoom here, so there's a new audio feature. So we'll have to see if it works. If it doesn't work here, Pam, but not the end of the world. With our pre-COVID research, I mentioned that we published that Caregiver Trend Report. And our first slide today that I started with was that trend report. And this is actually our 9th year bringing that report to the market. And this year's report was pretty special for us. We actually did 24, our CEO did 24 personal interviews with caregivers, CNAs, you can see their pictures over here on the right-hand side, and home health aides. We also surveyed 400 companies, and we did a large quantitative analysis of 2.5 million workers to get the why behind the data and the trends. And so we're gonna share some insight there. I may play a few videos here throughout, which are come from those personal interviews that our CEO held with those folks here earlier this year, pre-COVID. But I think write these pieces down, file them away as we talk today. But let's start by looking at who a caregiver is to really set the stage for our conversation today. So I'm here to bring you some data, but I also want to help all of us walk in their shoes, which is really the best place to start in building a strategy to recruit and retain this population. 90% of caregivers are women. More than half are women of color. Only 62% of home care workers work full time, and nearly half of them live in low income households. 81% of CNAs work full time, and 44% live in low income households. And 53% of all frontline healthcare workers are on some form of public assistance. So when we think about caregivers today, I encourage you and I want you to think about keeping these stats planted in the back of your mind. Caregivers are folks that have some worries that many of us may not have. like keeping food on the table and keeping their lights on. But they're also people who are dedicated to our industry and helping our clients and patients. Pre-COVID, our unemployment chart looked like this. It was making history for very different reasons than it is today. It was at a historical low. It was actually the lowest unemployment we'd seen in our country since 1969. Most people were working, very few people were unemployed. And if you can think about the perspective of a lower wage worker, it feels good to feel in demand. Their phone was ringing for work, and caregivers could literally get a job anywhere, whether that was in care or outside of care. And the senior care industry was battling it out for talent from all the industries and the companies that you see here on the screen. Caregivers were in the driver's seat, and often they were working across multiple industries. They may be a driver for Uber. They may also work at Starbucks and work in care. At conferences, pre-COVID, we were talking about how we could entice caregivers away from these industries and into home care, into senior care. What does a career in care look like compared to jobs at Amazon or jobs working at Target here? And we have a few videos. I'm going to try to play the first one, and Pam, I'm going to ask you here if you can't hear it to let me know that here. So I'll play the first one.
I worked for Allstate, Bankers Insurance. I've worked for Davis Bridal. I was a bridal consultant there for a year. I have my own business, a clothing line for plus size women. I worked for AT&T. I was a trainer for 5 years where I would travel and train people on Reimbursed, which is the cable, the internet, and phone. My whole background really is customer service. Being a caregiver is just something that I do on the side. I have multiple jobs.
Could you hear that okay, Pam?
Yes, it was just fine.
Awesome. Here's another one.
I've done everything from painting to office cleaning to running a 4-star hotel, being a manager at a motel. I've worked in billing and coding. I've done customer service. I've done sort of like a pharmacy tech type where, you do all the medications through the computer and calling and verifying insurance. I've done a plethora of things.
So you can see, and I wanted to share those videos, and we've got lots of them, but I wanted to share a few of those in here because that's really the perspective of a job seeker. This is really the psyche of a caregiver pre-COVID, right? So they were often coming in here. This is something that they did. They had a choice, right? And I think it's important. Caregivers were often working for multiple agencies and companies, and they were cobbling together schedules to meet their hour needs or their kids' schedules, and they were working for many different employers. It was more common than uncommon to see a caregiver work for at least 2 companies. And again, that could be Uber and a home care job, or working for a few different agencies, or a facility and an agency. Pre-COVID, the market was competitive, and frankly, it still is. And we'll talk about how that's changed here in a minute. But before COVID, caregivers would come to My Cna Jobs and they'd apply for 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 jobs in a single session. And when they wanted to pick up another shift or change their schedule, they'd apply to a lot of jobs knowing employers would call them and they could pick where they wanted to go. Something that we've struggled with as an industry before the virus hit was a big portion, 19% to be exact, of all caregivers were considering leaving our industry because they didn't think they could earn enough money to stay in the profession. They didn't see a clear path, if you will. So I think this quote here from Donna is really telling. And this is pulled from we have a large caregiver CNA Facebook forum as well. So Donna said, I work as a CNA at a hospital in Illinois. At the same hospital, I worked in housekeeping. When I took the CNA job, it was only part-time. Not only did I make almost $1 more in housekeeping, my insurance went up $100 a paycheck because it's technically part-time. I have to continue to pick up in housekeeping to get my hours. I find it horrible that housekeepers in some fast food chains make more than I do. Doesn't going to school to better yourself mean anything? This is a theme we saw in those personal interviews as well. Now, a trend that we've seen stay true for many years, now that I like to really bring into many of our presentations, is that not everybody wants to work in home care or wants to work in senior living. We're in a market with a labor shortage, and 22% of caregivers here identify as wanting to work for an agency, 18% in assisted living, and 8% in a skilled nursing setting. Now, I do think this home care number in particular is shifting upwards. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do like to bring this up, as I think when we talk about and think about strategies to recruit and retain folks, it's powerful to understand that only a small portion of our network, our industry here, has identified in the past as wanting to work for an agency or a facility here. And that's a powerful insight that you can do a lot with. In our 2020 research, again, this was conducted pre-COVID. I have that caveat here. We have some data to share on what we're seeing today. But pre-COVID, online reviews were a big theme. In general, caregivers search for reviews after an interview is booked, but either before that interview starts or right after they've been to that interview. In the study we did, again, qualitative study across those caregivers and CNAs, 100% of caregivers in our focus group said that they look at reviews, and that online reputation played a pretty big role in their decision to interview and work someplace. And I thought they were pretty fair and balanced in their assessments when they were looking at good and bad reviews. You can see from Serafina here on the screen, that was the theme. She said, I look at the good, I look at the bad. If the good are outweighing the bad, then I'm interested. She's a CNA for 5 years here. And we saw that again, thematically across the board. We did another study with agencies and facilities, and it made me laugh a little bit, made me chuckle a little bit. 100% of the caregivers say they're looking at reviews, and 100% of agencies said they have a good online reputation. And a single agency or facility reported that they had a poor online reputation. And that was based on responses from over 400 companies. So calling bluff a little bit on one of those two stats, but that is what the data said here. And I thought it was really interesting. Now, pre-COVID, we ran an analysis on where a caregiver wanted to work and why. And here's what they said on the left-hand side. Number one reason they left, one of the reasons they wanted to work someplace was hours. Number two was the comfort they felt with the employer. Were they kind? Was it a good experience? The size of the company, if they had mentorship or training opportunities, the current culture, what their existing turnover was, any online reviews, as we just talked about, and then the pay rate and the quality of care that they were offering. Now, I'm a big believer that the real story isn't always in a stat or in a number from a study. So you're going to get my personal pre-COVID analysis based on trends that we see in the market in terms of their actual behaviors and not just what a caregiver says. So my pre-COVID analysis is ours. I wholeheartedly believe the data shows this. Caregivers' actions, job seekers' actions support this. They care about working someplace where somebody's nice. It seems overly simplistic, but it's absolutely true. I think pay is higher here on the list than maybe it was in the data that we initially, the survey that we ran. I think they look at online reviews a lot sooner in the process than a lot of jobs employers think that they do. That culture and existing turnover is important. I think the quality of care that's being offered, that came up a lot during our personal interviews and experiences with the job seekers. I think they care about mentorship and training. And then I think they care about the size of the company. I think it is important. I don't think it's maybe as important as it came up in the initial data poll as well. Now, this takes us to the current pulse and kind of what we're seeing in the market now. So I'm gonna dive in there and talk about that. So again, that's stuff that we were seeing pre-March, and I've got that trend report, and I can chat out the link here in a minute for folks to go and download that trend report. And a lot of that is very relevant still, COVID or not, data that's valuable and relevant today. But let's talk about what's happened over the past few months and really where we think things are heading. So unemployment has made history over the past 6 months for a very different reason. Overnight, unemployment shot up. Retail closed, restaurants closed, a lot of businesses struggled. People found themselves out of work. Many people across the country went into a quarantine, right? Went into a lockdown. And unemployment, while not as high, has definitely remained high. It's starting to correct a bit, but it's definitely not what it was before. COVID will reshape and change many industries here for quite some time. And I think we're seeing that here as we head into the fall and winter ahead. I think this is fascinating. When you look at who unemployment has impacted the most this year, it's actually almost the exact definition of the caregiver population. So it's 20 to 34-year-olds, primarily folks without a college degree, overwhelmingly female, and African American, American Indian, and Hispanic populations have been the most heavily impacted. Interestingly enough, this is almost the exact footprint of demographic of your typical caregiver. A tough reality that we saw over the last 6 months that we think is that we think an estimated 25% of the care population has pulled themselves off of the job market due to some of the pieces we're going to talk about here. Unemployment benefits became a lot more attractive than they were before COVID began. The stimulus package, as we all know, allowed for an extra $600 a week of federal payment. Depending on where you're at in the country today on the line, that may be extended on the state level. I know that there's a new stimulus package in the works as we speak. We have an election coming up here in just under 2 weeks, and we'll see what the implications of that are as well. This is not a political statement, but it is one that we've heard from our own caregiver network. And you can see here, this NPR article talks about how a CNA for 20 years ultimately decided to stay home. She was a mom, she had 3 kiddos, she needed to homeschool like many of us on the line. She had her own childcare resources went away. And this is so typical of what we see when we look at the caregiver population. She's not an abnormal exception. This is the norm. 90+% of caregivers are women, 22% of caregivers are single parents. So you would think with unemployment shooting up, it would be easier to hire, but that hasn't necessarily been the case over the last 6 months. We're starting to see unemployment go back down a bit, but it's still well north of where it was. So I think this will be interesting to keep an eye on. And I challenge us to go back to one of those first slides I shared to talk about where your typical caregiver is coming from socioeconomically as well. So I mentioned before that caregivers used to apply to 5 to 10 jobs in a single sitting. We're seeing they're being more selective. They're actually spending more time searching with each session, which is really interesting. They are spending a longer amount of time on My Cna Jobs, but they're applying to fewer jobs in each sitting. This means that they're really doing their due diligence. They want to know who you are. They want to know what you offer. And these things on the screen here, they matter even more now. Your job content matters. What are you talking about? Is it relevant? I was talking about this the other day with a client. We were doing lots of webinars early on in COVID. We partnered with the Home Care Association of America, Littler, a lot of state associations just to talk about, hey, kind of the voice of the caregiver. Here's what folks are saying across the country. And we asked agencies and facilities if they had updated their job postings since the start of the pandemic, and less than a quarter of folks had. That number is a lot higher now, but I would encourage you as a follow-up to today's conversation, if you're the recruiter, you're the person who owns that, great. If you're not, I'd encourage you to talk with your HR teams, talk with your recruiting teams, see, are they acknowledging, for better or worse, the elephant in the room? What does COVID look like for your facility or for your agency? And it's really interesting. They're looking at that. They're spending more time on that job content. Their experience with your organization and the recruiter matters. So it mattered before. All of this matters even more now. The interview they're having with you, they're really evaluating employers much more granularly than they did before. And we'll look at how that shifted a bit deeper here in just a minute. But I think this is important to keep in mind. I like anytime my Midwestern roots here, maybe that I can have a cow on a webinar slide here. But one thing that's come out of COVID that I think is really positive is that it really got senior care careers on the map. And I like to say that senior care got a big Got Milk campaign over the past 6 months. People that had never heard of a job in care are learning about what we're all about. Home care jobs, assisted living jobs, hospice roles, they're almost center stage, if you will. Now, that doesn't mean it makes recruiting easier overnight, as the demand for those experienced and skilled workers has never been higher. But I do think that we'll see more people entering this profession because they're learning what it is. And that's a great thing for all of us on the line. We launched a free online caregiver certification training program when COVID hit and went live back in April. And the intention is to attract those folks in who may be displaced workers, have found themselves, unfortunately, out of their own industry, out of a job, but they're exploring a career in care. And the goal here is to help them learn more about the industry, explore the profession, because they're learning what it is. And this is a good thing for all of us, to set them up for success in our industry. We've had tens of thousands of potential caregivers, of job seekers from all different industries come and complete that 4-hour course in a single sitting. That's telling. That means that there are people who are interested in these jobs that we've had a harder time reaching before. And they're interested, they're here, they're coming to us, they're looking for a career path, they're looking for information on what it means to have a career in care. So if you're on the line today and you're open to recruiting people without experience, we have some new free tools that are part of My Cna Jobs that that can help you spread the word. And this is an area that I think we all need to come together on as an industry. We're asked a lot about interview show-ups. So people aren't showing up to my interviews, and we're asked most frequently about the impact that COVID has had here. And it's interesting, it's fascinating. We can see show-up rates across 2 of our tools. So I mentioned earlier, we have a suite of tools, we have a job board, we have a caregiver marketplace, but we have an interview booking service where we pre-screen folks and we can actually see interviews virtually or in person. We also have a career fair program where we can promote hiring events locally, or they can happen virtually through our virtual video tools as well. So what's interesting is in our interview booking service, when it's virtual, we can actually see who is booked and who shows up. So we can't see show-ups across the industry, but we've got a pretty good indicator across our own tools with the footprint we have. And overall, caregiver interview show-up rates, we've actually seen those go up during the pandemic. Again, they're being more selective, so we're seeing application rates almost go down. Each applicant, though, is more qualified, and there's more caregivers showing up to interviews. We're seeing caregiver orientation rates, however, go down. So they're being more selective. They're showing up to the interview at a higher rate, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're interested in taking the case or the shift or the opportunity. Another interesting trend that we're seeing is because we can see recruiter show-ups, which is something we couldn't see before, right? We have technology that shows it. The caregiver came to the video room, the interviewer, the recruiter came in here. We couldn't see this before, now we can. And we have just as big of a problem with caregiver show-ups as we do with recruiter no-shows. When COVID hit, again, forced us to move to those virtual tools, which is really neat because now we have more data, and again, helped us to surface some opportunities to help train internal teams with our clients on best practices. Now let's take a look at what experienced caregivers want now. And I broke this up, and in the next slide, we'll talk about people who are entering the profession for the first time. But a few new things have entered the picture. So we talked about those first 2 columns a few slides ago, and that was based on our earlier trends, our pre-COVID data. Here's our current pulse, this 3rd column here. Safety has entered the picture, and that wasn't even in the other 2. And I think it's number 1. Comfort and good experience are more pronounced. This is almost tied for number 1. Pay is still a driver, and I think it's more important than it was before. Again, you can't put 3 things as number 1, but if I could, it would be these top 3. Caregivers now care more about mentorship, training, career paths. I think we'll start to see caregivers working for fewer companies. Ours in here is not just about schedule, it's also about flexibility. We talked about caregivers that have kiddos, have changing schedules, what happens if someone gets sick. A lot of the same elements here are still important, but they have different lipstick on them now than they did before COVID. Caregivers value people, and they value working someplace that they feel safe, they feel secure, that they can grow with, and that will take care of them too. And I think this is even more pronounced than it was before. I think a trend that we'll see is that retention will start to improve for the companies that really trust their team and treat them well. I think we'll see some positive movement here, and it's a wonderful thing for our industry. Now, that being said, I think that if a company doesn't treat their team well or isn't a top employer, I think they're going to struggle more, as caregivers are truly going to be seeking out those top employers to hang their hat. I predict 2021 is going to be about being selective, and I think that will have a big impact, and we'll see that next year. Now let's look at what potentially those folks that are unemployed or unexperienced caregivers, what they're looking for. This is those folks, again, who are coming in here exploring a career in care. They want to understand what the profession and a career path could look like. They want to understand what coaching and training opportunities are available. They want to know what it looks like to enter without experience, potentially what it means to become a CNA or a hospice aide or a home health aide. And they want to understand, just like those experienced caregivers and CNAs, what's being done to protect them, what's being done to protect their families, what happens if they get COVID, what happens if their loved one does. Like, what does it look like to work for your company on the other side of this pandemic? And I think this is important to keep in mind, because as an industry, we should be focused on both of these groups. I know that's a hard thing to say right now. I know everyone's juggling a lot, but we should be just as focused on those folks that are in our industry with experience as we are about taking advantage of this unique opportunity, this silver lining in COVID, and attracting in those inexperienced caregivers and those folks who are displaced, who want to explore and grow a career in care. All right, now let's get to kind of the fun stuff. And this is your playbook. So what do you do with all of this insight to help you ramp recruitment and drive retention? So I broke up a few strategies here. These are the ones I'd write down, I'd discuss with your team, I'd talk about potentially implementing. Some of these cost money, some of these are free, but they will all help you build a workplace that's going to be the most attractive to the folks that are driving your business today, which are those caregivers, those CNAs, and those home health aides. First strategy to think through here, the emergence of new top tier employers and really the opportunity to become an employer of choice. You want to be the place that a caregiver wants to work in your community, in your town, in your city. Every community, every city has places people want to work, places people don't want to work, and places people don't know about. And you want to fight hard to become known and to become a destination. Again, I think top employers are going to outpace those much more than they did pre-COVID. There will be an even bigger gap between a top tier workplace and everyone else on the other side of this. And the people at the top will have to work a little less hard at recruitment and retention, or work differently, if you will. It's interesting here at My Cna Jobs, we see that a lot. Again, we work with thousands of agencies and facilities on a national level. Companies that are competitive and write good job ads, they get more applicants. Companies that have good online reviews, they tend to be better employers, they've got higher show-up rates. Companies that pay better than their neighbors almost always report the highest callback rates and higher numbers. So I build in a concentrated and focused strategy this year to become a destination in your community if you aren't already. You want to be every place a caregiver is searching for work. You want to be on all the job boards, on social, in your community, get people talking about you. And then you want to ensure that what they're reading and what they're hearing is true and it's positive. Next strategy here is to focus on a career path. With caregivers being more selective, they want to know their next step. And that next step is going to be different for everyone. There's not a one-size-fits-all career path. It's really individualized. For some people, a path to become a mentor could be powerful. For other people, it might be becoming specialized and learning a new skill like dementia care, Alzheimer's. For others, it could mean getting their CNA or their LPN or even their RN. And I think focusing on individualized career paths that are tied to wage incentives will help to keep your team engaged and around. We say this a lot at My Cna Jobs for our own team, and I'm a very big subscriber to the saying that teams win. You can have the most rock star CEO, and ours is pretty great, or the best RN on staff, or the best scheduler. But the way to get ahead is to have everyone in your boat, right? Everyone on your team strong and rowing in the right direction. And I think we will see, and we already do see, a greater divide happening between those teams that have strengthened themselves during COVID and teams that have gotten weaker. When we hear things like, that's not my job, I just do X, when we're talking to a recruiter, it's almost always a sign that the office is going to struggle more. That's someone that we talk to that breathes from that team player perspective. I'd look at internal team building this year. I'd look at training and coaching up your internal team and your office staff and your community staff. I'd make sure they have clear goals, they're getting measured, they have their own path, and most importantly, that they're inspired. And I think this is interesting. It has been a tough year. It has been a tough year for all of us. Personally, it's been a tough year for many folks. Professionally, there's a lot of stress, and that's not something that came and went in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. We're in this. This is our life and our reality now. And that's the same for your teams. And I think this is the recipe for a company that will rock and roll into 2021, are those folks that are setting their internal teams and their caregivers up for success. And if anyone on the line has tips on how you've strengthened your teams during COVID and want to share those with the group when we open it up for Q&A, I'd love to hear more from you here on what you're seeing or what you're doing that's working. Now, I think this is interesting, and staying current, honestly, couldn't be more relevant. I think the market is changing quickly. I encourage folks on the line to do a competitive review from a recruitment standpoint, from an offering standpoint. What are caregivers saying? What is your team saying? Keeping that pulse. It's hard, don't get me wrong. This is not an easy thing to do, but I encourage you to do it. I talked about earlier in the pandemic when folks, hadn't updated their job postings. That's changed. But now it's like, have you updated your job posting since June, right? Are you talking about what things look like today? Have you done an analysis of what your competitors in and outside of senior care are offering in your markets today? So again, continue to do this. This doesn't go away. I'm excited about this one. I talked about this one briefly as well, but I do truly see an opportunity here to tap into workers that have never heard of being a caregiver or a CNA before. This is a problem. Any conference anyone attended the last 5 years, people have been talking about this. So how do we attract people into care? We were talking, a year ago about how do you get people to want to work in care versus working at Target, or want to work in care versus driving for Uber. And there's a lot of challenges there. Pay rates not being the only piece, but a big element there. Now we've got folks who are finding themselves, exploring this career in care for the first time. And I think as an industry, this is a great time for us to put our best foot forward, solve an industry shortage challenge we didn't have a more clear solution on before. I mentioned Coach Up Care a little bit here. And this is really an opportunity. It's free, it's branded, it's a caregiver certification training program. It's built into all of our clients' accounts, and allows you and your facility or your agency to actually share with people in your community to come take this free 4-hour course, see if this is a good career path for you. And I'll show you where to check out more on that here in just a few minutes. But I encourage you to do this and to figure out how to create career paths for those folks. If you aren't already virtual with your interviews, I encourage you to consider that. If you are, I encourage you to stay there. I think especially as we head into the fall here, if I've learned anything, I do not have a crystal ball and the best laid plans this year, right? But our averages we saw with in-person interviews through our interview booking service pre-COVID, in person were 60%. With virtual interviews, that's gone up to about an 80% interview show up rate. So I think there's a higher interview show up rate. I think it's, great to meet caregivers where they're at. Many caregivers are, going between jobs, stepping out on a lunch break to interview someplace else. The number one place that caregivers searches for a job is while they're at work. So finding a way to connect with them that way, and virtual allows you to do that, is effective and really interesting. So again, if you're not already here, go here. If you're here, consider staying here and see what this looks like longer term. Just like many of you on the line, when COVID hit, you had to reinvent the way you did things, so did we. We launched a series of virtual interview and career fair tools within 3 weeks back in March. It became clear that the in-person interview booking services and the in-person hiring events that we were doing with our clients just weren't gonna cut it. So the impact we've seen here is awesome. And I think virtual is here to stay. I'd hands down implement hiring events virtually if you haven't as part of your strategy. Some feedback we're getting here is really neat. From caregivers, we're hearing that there's a higher correlation of those folks wanting to work for that company after the event. So it's a higher ratio. We're hearing that their just general experience with the company and impression of the company is more positive. They get higher ratings post virtual than in person. The recruiters are loving these. They're shorter events. They're more condensed. They're meeting the recruiter where they're at. They can do that from literally anywhere. And especially as a lot of our clients and partners centralize their recruitment models, this is a great way to do that. And it allows your teams and your organizations to tap into new workers. Often folks attending hiring events are people who aren't applying to your jobs, people you haven't seen before through other channels or resources as well. Last two strategies here, the more real-time your recruitment, the better. You'll hire more people, you'll save yourself time. We recommend that you implement and adopt a real-time recruitment strategy that happens daily and not just when it's convenient, right? Create that engine, keep it oiled. This is not something that was done before March. It's now becoming a common practice. It's working, and I think it will stick. And we've created a lot of partnerships, established them for our clients: digital reference checking, digital background checking, forms, digital forms, e-signatures, all partnerships we developed for our clients and partners so that they could truly go virtual with their recruitment over this time. And again, I think this over time is going to lead to more of a real-time recruitment strategy that's going to help set up those companies for success. Now, there's a saying that you're only as strong as your weakest link. I think that's never been more true. And now is a unique time, and I think the best time to build your brand and to appreciate your teams. Get them behind you, get them talking. This not only moves the retention needle in the right direction, but we talked about how important online reviews are. Now more than ever, they're really important. You want recent reviews talking about how you're navigating this situation. Get your caregivers happy and get them talking. So I'm gonna open it up here for some folks if they have Q&A, if that's coming through here. I know we've got lots of folks on the line here today. I'm gonna pull up my information. I'm gonna drop in a few links into the chat as well. There's lots of resources that we have at My Cna Jobs. We're kind of scratching the surface here for everybody in today's conversation, but I'm going to drop in, let me see here. Here we go. This is a link to download our annual caregiver trend report. So this was published again pre-COVID, but where kind of the first portion of our conversation came from today. We also have a lot of pay data that we do, and I didn't dive too much into this for today's conversation as well, but I did want to highlight this as an interesting resource, again, dropping that into the chat for folks. This is pay data pulled across millions of job seekers on a national level. You can actually plug in your zip code, what you pay, certified, uncertified. It'll email you a free report letting you know how your pay compares to folks in your local markets there. So this is free. All this stuff is free. You don't have to be a client of ours, but I wanted to send some of those resources over. And then if folks are on the line and they are interested in a conversation or a deeper demo about what My Cna Jobs looks like today, this is we have a full suite of tools, things you can access a la carte, resources we have on an ongoing basis. And I'm going to send over as a follow-up to today's conversation a couple of tools, but one of those things is our virtual event guide. I know a lot of people on the line may be exploring that option. What does it mean to do a virtual event? And so I'm going to share that here with folks as well. And then our pandemic job post guide. So I will follow up with some of these resources, but I did want to drop them into the chat here. So if you have questions and you want to shoot them to me one-on-one as well, my email is here. But Irene, it looks like you plugged in a question here. So I'll go ahead and tap into that. And I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Okay. So Irene said, we take pride in conducting behavioral interviews to help ensure we are hiring caregivers appropriately to place in a home alone with a client. Virtual interviews don't allow you to do that. Any suggestions? Not the employer here. I would say many of my clients are finding a lot of success with virtual interviews. They are finding them to be successful alternatives to in-person interviews. We have a video room, and I can show you here inside of My Cna Jobs. Our clients are using this. This is a lot of Maggie here, but you've got your own video link here. They're meeting caregivers in here. They're having team meetings in here. They're doing interviews in here. They're running orientation in here. They're using a tool like this to conduct those interviews and finding a lot of success with it. I think it's often in how it's being done, but I would encourage you, and I can share we have a pandemic playbook as well. I can share that as a follow-up, and there's some tips in there and some best practices. I think many folks, it'll be a blend of the two, but I think that there are a lot of people finding success with those being video interviews versus phone. All right, Julie, you said, what keeps aging services providers from paying their frontline workers a competitive and livable wage? The need to be competitive with wages has been talked about for years, but the needle hasn't moved much. I know there's some folks that are, I think Sarah replied there as well too. This is a conversation I don't think is going away anytime soon. In short order, what we've seen on a national level from a pay perspective is interesting. Caregiver and CNA wages in particular, adjusting for inflation, have not gone up at all since 2008. So CNAs over the past 12 years are not on a national level being paid more there. So I know that Sarah brings up a good example. In New York, many aides are upset that they're getting that hourly rate, but their insurance reimbursements there are that's a huge. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, but a big part of it is reimbursement. A lot of private duty agencies, concerned about raising their rates to cover higher wages. I think even with a pandemic right now, we're still facing a caregiver shortage, and pay rates are a big part of that conversation. And I think we're going to see more wage pressure in the coming years. I don't think that's going away. But a bigger piece of that is the relatively small margins that a lot of agencies operate in. Not all, but a lot do. Good question. Talking about being reimbursed for travel. So Sarah, that's a great question here. So living in a rural area, compensating for mileage, all of that. I'll be open. A lot of our clients are paying for mileage. They're paying for travel time. They're doing gas mileage. Like, they are starting to do that in rural areas. It's a big reason. Time is money for a lot of people. It's especially the case for an hourly employee who's not making any money while they are traveling. That's preventing them from working someplace else where they could be making money during that time, where it's time spent away from their own family and loved ones as well. So I think a lot of our clients, for lack of a better, more creative answer, are paying mileage. They're covering for that travel time, or they're paying a higher rate for those harder to get to cases to help to compensate and offset that as well. Heidi, good question. Do you feel continual training during tenure plays a key role in retention of staff? I can't even get the whole question out of my mouth before I want to say yes. Yes, fundamentally, we see. I mentioned that we run this caregiver trend report year over year. This is our 9th year doing this report. Every single year for 9 years, and I've been here for nearly 7 of those 9 years. Every year, training is a key element. The majority of caregivers are looking for training. They're looking for opportunities for growth and development. They look to their employers for that. And I think it's one of those things, whether or not your staff is taking advantage of the training that's being offered, it's one of those things where your people want to work for employers that are investing in them. Whether they choose to take advantage of it or not, I do think offering it is valuable and will go a long way towards recruiting new staff members, as well as retaining the ones that you have on board. And it's as much about offering the training as it is about offering the career pathing. So what does it look? And some of this might be tied to wage increases, or might be tied to mentorship or training opportunities. for folks to stay with you long-term as well. So good question. Sarah, I don't have an opinion or a question or an answer on CNAs and HHAs unionizing. I think that's a many-layered onion. So I've read some interesting things recently around that, but it's not something that I have an opinion. I know there are some parts of the country where that has already happened. That's already how caregivers work today. But I don't have an opinion on that on a national level. I think there's a lot of, again, pieces at play there. So these are awesome questions. Any other questions? I know there's lots of folks on the line. I wanted to get some of those resources over to you. I promise to follow up with folks and share those as well. Again, lots of reasons to explore, changing some of your playbook this year, so to speak. We're in a unique season right now, I think, as an industry. We're very bullish, so to speak, on care and the growth of our industry. But it doesn't mean that it's not without its challenges. So we're excited to see what the year ahead holds as well, and look forward to continuing the conversation with many of you. So anything from your end, Pam?
Thanks so much, Maggie. This was great, fascinating information. My first thought as I was about midway through was we have to have Maggie back in a year when we've gone through COVID and we've gone through some of this and what some of the changes might look like. But as you said, it's been a pivot year for many of us. I don't think anybody can deny that. A year of reshaping our goals, how we're doing things, looking outside the box, and many of these things, it's a good thing. I think virtual is here to stay, and many, across the spectrum, for many good reasons, because it's allowing us to reach more people. But these are serious issues that affect every aging services provider, that affects our economy. And as we move forward and we have more needs, as we know they will grow, this information is really core, that we really get to the bottom of what it is we need to do to take care of this labor force, because the baby boomers are plowing on into that arena.
My favorite phrase, right? The silver tsunami. I think that's
exactly.
There you go. But no, I mean, genuinely, Pam, we appreciate you and the team having us on here. I think this is something, as you shared in here, that we're passionate about, not just have some info to share. It's something we really care about and are invested in as an organization. And we're working together on some cool things here for the coming year. But we appreciate you including us here in this virtual roadshow. One day I'm excited to actually get in my car and go somewhere else besides the grocery store and my office here. But we're looking forward to it. So there's
for sure. We do
exactly.
know that. We don't know when, but the time will come.
It'll happen. We have to believe it will. So, but I genuinely appreciate you and Van having me on here, and we'll follow up with folks who registered today with those resources, and thank you guys for your active questions. And if you have any more of them, shoot us an email here or reach out to us at myCNAjobs. So
absolutely. So you'll be getting some great information from Maggie. You will also have the opportunity to get our new white paper called Reveal Aging, which is talking about workforce retention and training. And so you'll have an opportunity after this to get a link to that, and you can download it. So that might be helpful for you as well. We're going to switch gears next month and talk about another quite a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. It is National Family Caregiver Month, and the theme this year is caregiving in crisis. And no doubt the pandemic has brought to light the vast needs of these 78 million plus caregivers in this country who are providing care, non-paid care to loved ones, friends, with disabilities, chronic illnesses, disease, those with the vulnerabilities of aging. For those of you who know my story, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but the reason I got into the space that I am in now is my longtime journey as being a family caregiver. I went on to work with thousands of families, hundreds of organizations, and helping families, which then brought me into the work that AGE-u-cate is now doing. But one thing I say often is that every stakeholder in this space needs to be intentionally looking at how they can help family caregivers, because the needs are that big, they are growing that fast. And so I am excited to actually be leading the session next month in November. And we are going to be kicking off a series called Straight Talk on Caregiving. We're going to be diving deep into the issues of family caregivers and how you as providers can look outside the box and how you connect with family caregivers, how you can support them, educate them, because all of us together need to do more. We need to be better at collaborating. And so another good time to reshape ourselves, as Maggie said, pivot and think about this time when the pandemic has brought to light the needs of this vulnerable, often underserved, and often silent population. So I look forward to being with all of you and more to talk about family caregivers next month. So thank you all. Stay well, stay safe, and Maggie, again, we can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Pam. I appreciate you and all you're doing for seniors and caregivers right now. So talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you all.
Bye.